I go suddenly quiet for a minute or two, it's probably because my kids are here with my dinner.
Yeah, I am watching the stream. Yep.
Yes. What shader do you want to see first? Okay. Very much water shader. Yay. Work with Tigers X. Much fast. Now you have you have viewport still clapped down. You have render open but not viewport. Now denoises. Depends on what you want. What do you want? You're currently outside the water. Yes. You see? Caustics. Caustics with... Nah. Sex is shit for that. It is Voronoi. This Voronoi distorted, but it's like two Voronoi stack on top each other. So it gives you this caustics. Well, yes, but denoising says no. Like you need to render it a bit. Yeah, you see. Nah, you see a bit God rays there. Yeah, you see it. Yes, the God rays. It's all customizable. If you want lighter water, you can make lighter water. like EV or cycles. You can. It is the water is a separate object. It is an extruded plane. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Be gone, Blender.
This is Sparta. Ah, thought you were dying there.
Yeah, the stream is lagging, so. Yeah, just a little bit.
It's not too bad here.
Yeah, for me also not too bad. Damn, bruh. Discord? Yes.
Also, my microphone was on mute on the stream. Damn.
So you only hear me and
My bad.
nothing.
I had no idea.
That's why I restream. Wait a minute. Let me just check my microphone settings first.
Yeah, right. Oh,
For all my big mouth.
Oh man, I was peeking the microphone there. Okay, cool. So now we have a proper microphone, and now we have the Discord microphone was activated the whole time, so there was some feedback there, and we had a look at the shader. So my first recommendation, Slink, is there we go, the default camera, I guess. This is where it is good.
We have two cameras in here.
We got two cameras. So label your cameras. So this is the top one.
Yes,
Okay.
it looks like down.
Looks down into the water.
Yeah, one
Alright.
looks also cool.
And then we have one under the water.
Yes. I also like how it animates.
So I can't see the course. Whoa, very noisy one.
I think either you broke the shader somehow again.
I think so. So let me reload the scene.
A good workman never blames his tools.
And crash. Beautiful. Hello, pancakes.
But I definitely like how it animates. Also made like the degrees are like in the wind direction. How it facing. If you have like 0 degrees, it will like go in the X direction.
Okay.
And then
Alright.
you change the degrees to change the flow of water. Yeah.
Okay, and you added this to your Gumroad as well? Or
Yes.
like all these instructions? If you
Yes,
add them
only.
also to the blend
Nah,
file?
I didn't add the instruction to my Gumroad. It just says it is a water shader.
It's a thing. It exists.
It's a thing. Maybe
I made a thing.
You made a thing.
definitely.
Alright, well I highly recommend you add some instructions both to the Blender file and to the water shader description. Might help people to make the most of it nice and quickly. And also
Yeah.
which version you developed it for. The 2.93
2.9. Yes.
or 3.0 alpha. Because because I'm using 3.0 alpha, it's a little bit unstable.
Always
Yes.
have been.
That's a good excuse. I have a question for you, Andreas.
Yes?
This is from Lazy Gaming on YouTube. My render cycle is very slow for a 3 GB GPU.
Nah. Nope.
3 gigabyte GPU. Depends on the version
Sounds like
that you're using, no?
Yeah. Also, you can like optimize the shit out of like the scene. It should like, for me it renders like fairly quickly the scene. Like
I think it's so if you're sitting
First
on
thing, 3 gigabytes is not so bad. Mine gig, so it's like half the performance.
You need to, well, with textures.
Yeah, that's right. You need to work with 2K when you can. Don't use 4K. That's one thing. Merge your geometry together so you have less geometry and use instances as often as possible. So as you've seen that, for example, a GPU can render more, has less objects. It doesn't really matter how many triangles you have in an object, but if you have less of them, it works better. Same with instances. You use up less RAM if you use more instances. So for example, if you have a tree, set up the shader so that it changes the random color, and then instance the tree. Don't make 100 different real objects, but use instances. When you're using your GPU, switch over to your GPU settings in the system here. You can either choose optics, which has some limited features, or CUDA, which is okay. You can also dual it onto your CPU and your GPU, which I recommend, which may limit some features, but usually doesn't. And increase your VBO timeout. So your texture timeout and your VBO timeout. These timeouts are typically just about 2 minutes, but sometimes it may take longer for your GPU card to heat up if the scene is, or like get full, I guess you're supposed to load up the textures and things before it starts rendering. In this case, the Blender sometimes times out, and then it will make the render crash automatically. So if you're pushing it to its limit, you're a timeout. And so that's what you start to do to work that concept, is increase your timeout. And then after you've optimized your textures, okay, so you're using 3 gigs. So 3 gigs of data, you look down here at your VRAM information. Right now I'm using 4 out of 6 more or less to render this out. So that means, and also I take a look at like my memory is 257 megabytes. So this VRAM is relatively inaccurate, so I wouldn't worry too much about that, but the memory one is what's important. Because if you increase it over your 3 gigs of memory in your file, it will then start, instead of writing to the RAM of the GPU, it'll start writing to disk. And instead of using your physical RAM, it'll also start writing to disk. When things start to write to disk, things go drastically slower. So I used to do renders which would take about 30 gigs per render, 30 committed gigs. So it would fill up my GPU, it would fill up my physical RAM, and then I'll start writing to disk. And when it started writing to disk, the renders would take between, instead of taking 5 minutes or 3 minutes per frame, it was taking 15 minutes to 20 minutes per frame. So you got to make sure that your RAM usage is less than your total RAM on your GPU and on your physical RAM. And then you're good, so that you don't write to disk. And after that, well, it's always about the sampling and your light paths. Obviously, you can drop your total bounces everywhere, or turn things off that you don't need, turn off your caustics, things like that.
You actually don't need that many light bounces to make scenes look good.
Exactly. Sometimes you can turn almost everything off and only turn on some selective things that you need. Like,
Yes.
if you don't have any transparency in the scene, turn them off. If you have no transmission, turn it off. If you have no glossiness and you're only using diffuse, turn the glossy off. Those are the different things that you can optimize a lot of time by just turning things off and then turning on things that you need. And also, if you go into your render settings down below, there's another one called Simplify, which is
Fast. I have simplified.
Simplify setting.
For me, it's very, I don't know. I just there
There it is.
under here.
Yeah, it's under here. Simplify, you turn that on. Make sure your maximum subdivisions are very low. And also, when you can, turn off subdivisions. Take your subdivisions in and keep them at a max. Use smooth normals. Smooth your normals out as much as you can. And try not to subdivide your geometry too much, because that also quadrifies, if not octifies, your geometry count, which can slow things down with light rays and bounces. That you can fake a lot of things using only normals. So basically, if you don't have the hardware, apply gaming techniques where you try to run as if you're using raster graphics and work your samples, and also kind of do some tuning of your hardware, or sorry, of your software, so that it makes the most of your graphics card regardless of the time and the resources limits that you have. So those are some of my tips that I do with my own work. But typically 3 gigs is good enough to run game engine like graphics. For doing Eevee, you're good. If you're doing cycles, then maybe I would start thinking about optimizing your scenes and also working cloud if you're working under a deadline with animations. So you got to think of the pros and cons. But you can work with 3 gigs.
Well, on that subject, my new graphics cards come next week, the week after, can't remember. They get picked up tomorrow.
That's pretty nice.
Well, it's actually really good because the guys basically give me them for free. Obviously, I'll try and pay him something, you know what I mean? But he's updated to something like 6,390. He's like, do you want these old graphics cards? And they're like, they're Titans. You know what I mean? They're good graphics cards.
Yeah,
Like,
good.
yeah.
Why not?
It's better than what I've got. So in total, I'll have 7 graphics cards. So I don't know how it'll handle with Cycles X and stuff.
Can you sidechain them? Like you're running all 7 graphics cards even though they're different hardware?
Yeah. You get PCI extension cables. So I'm going to try and... You're essentially rendering with 6 or 7 graphics cards. Well, 6, because the 7th graphics card's your display.
Wow. That's kind of cool actually. I only have 1 graphics card.
Yes, hey.
I was just talking with the guys earlier that I have a 4th gen i7 and 1 graphics card with a GTX 1060. That's all I've got.
Yeah.
I think Eevee.
I'm due for an upgrade.
Well, I'm due for an upgrade as well. I just don't have the
Yeah.
funds to go out and buy 390s like this guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Anyway.
think his total bill was something like $14,000 just for graphics cards.
It sounds about right.
Aye.
Hey, we have a new media supply here. Welcome to the Q&A today. It's a big honor to have you here, actually. So this is an open panel, really. We have a small agenda that we go through. We're currently just doing small talk and also going through Slink's shaders right now. But later on, I'm going to be working on modular assets, and if JKO shows up, teach him how to do that. Work the short film. You know, the project, I think. So for those of you here at New Media Supply, he is actually the guy that runs the Blender add-ons website.
Yeah.
So he does great add-on reviews and documents all of them, and runs like a big database. Huge honor to have you here.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm very interested in the modular assets.
Great.
Nice.
So let me just take a look at the Zamzoc shader quickly. Loaded up an older version of Blender which doesn't have Cycles X, so that I can use the Node Previews add-on, which is not compatible.
You don't need Cycles X for this.
Yeah,
It is the Eevee shader.
but
Lucky bastard.
but the problem is the Node Previews add-on doesn't show the thumbnails with Cycles X.
Yeah.
So this add-on is a very good one for previewing your nodes, but it doesn't work with Cycles X. Sadly. He won't support it until 3.0 comes out officially. So this add-on is very cool. I like your little technique. So Link, how does this work? How does this shader technique work?
So I'm using Eevee's shader to RGB. I may show it myself.
Right, let me just log in. And where is it? Here it is. Let's log in, watching your stream. Loading your... screen it. Okay, good.
So to create those dots here, I use window coordinates because those are the only coordinates that really work.
Yep.
Camera coordinates make like
It
some
goes
weird,
deformed, yeah.
some, it makes some weird patterns here, you see,
Yeah, I
and
see
I
it.
don't like that. And then I use like window coordinates for it. Then I do like a bunch of vector math to make, in the end, dots. Just
Yeah.
dots.
Which is what you
All
use
this.
less than to make it hard.
Yes.
Okay.
Hide, subtract to get a little bit down so it's not perfectly wide. Multiply it with shade RGB again. I explain it later why. Add it to the original color. Then we here. Then again I do like another map range node. Like the first map range was controlling
And
the
using a
dots here.
diffuse as the shaded RGB with some broken
Yes.
normals. Gotcha.
Normals, so if you want to use normals, you can use it.
Yep.
Another map range to an add node to distorted noise texture.
Okay.
So you get this result.
That's
Color
how you
ramp
get-
it. Color ramp it so you get like some nice shadow deformation.
Yep, nice.
And then multiply it again. And then into a emission node. So
Oh,
you
it's an
have,
emission node.
yes.
That's how you got the two colors.
So it looks like it's shaded, but it's actually not.
It's
Actually
masked
didn't.
with the diffuse shaded
Yes.
RGB. Gotcha. And then you
Yes.
deform them up.
Actually, one thing I like.
So the
like about
specular
shader-
highlights, this was also like another type of mask that you're using?
Yes, I have two masks. First for the dots, like you can see, I can control it separately, and for the shadow, I can more or less.
That's kind of handy. The dot scale's pretty cool too.
Yeah, shadow scale.
Oh, useful. I might
Yes,
pick this to
and-
pieces actually, because I've been looking into a system that I need to add some scratchy
also I can,
pencil
like-
into the shadows. I need to look at that.
You can also control the rotation of it.
And is that noise in 3D space in the shadow? Or-
It is in 2D space actually,
Oh, okay.
because it
Projected
doesn't
from
look
the screen.
different. Yes, it doesn't look different, but it will perform better. Like it is faster than if it would use like
Than
3D
3D,
noise
yeah.
texture.
The effect is very similar anyway.
Yes.
Cool, man. Thanks for sharing this for
Also-
free. I like this one a
Yes.
lot.
Also, the color is like slightly fernal, like very slightly fernal.
That's
So
kind of cute.
It looks nicer for me, at least.
Cool. So what is that the first node group? What does that do?
It's just average scale. You like, if you can copy and paste like a node tree, wait, the values in here, like those values will link up. So
Okay, it's to link between all the materials.
yes,
Oh, that's
so
a
it's
handy
easier to-
workaround.
so you can like, maybe I want to make the dots bigger, like everything bigger. This like the scale overall.
Yeah, this is the
of dots
override,
in.
and that's all of them together.
Yes,
Huh. Who knew? That's actually a really good trick. Thanks for that.
you can also put like an RGB node in here and control the color linking.
Yep, that's good.
Also a thing you can do. Really nice.
As a global system. Actually, that's a really
Yes.
good tip. Super useful.
Also,
I
one
never
thing-
thought of that in all the years that I've been working in shader nodes.
One thing
This
I
is
like
so
is, like,
simple.
The dot's color is actually controlled by the color of the light.
Oh, really?
Yes, blue, green, red, but on darker colors it's like a bit darker, so less dots. You need to increase strength. Yes.
Yeah, as with most dark
Also-
light, you need a very strong bulb.
Yes, so green light, and you can see green dots.
That's also very cool as well. And this is also for free, right, from Gumroad?
Yes, of course.
I'm rating you 5 stars with one.
Yeah.
Your water shader get 4.
Fuck you.
Sorry about that.
Man.
Just need some documentation in it. But this one here is pretty self-explanatory.
So what's it doing? Is it projecting stuff on?
It is projecting from the view, like from the camera.
Is it like projecting an image?
No,
It just
it's a pattern, no?
projects patterns, yeah. Noise texture, that projects noise texture. And also like dots. Dots which I do. I could have done the dots with Voronoi, but it would be less performant. So why should I?
I think this is really useful, actually. I'm going to pick this to pieces for sure. Like, you've got some really novel techniques that I quite like, which I know will come in handy, because that was on my to-do list, was to find some scratchy pencils on the shadows instead of using the line art modifier or actually drawn in grease pencil. I needed to make some pencil textures actually drawn into the shadows. This kind of fixes that perfectly. And maybe for performance reasons, I can also use that for my specular highlight painterly that I have. So it's kind of handy.
Fuck yeah.
Good work there.
Thank you.
I'm having my usual network issues.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Fucking nightmare.
Ah, damn. So, Slink, you're the man of the hour, actually. So you also have a piece of art that you made on the Blender Royale. Did you
Yes,
add some
I
extra
have.
love to it?
No.
No?
No.
I added a little
did.
bit of extra love to my piece.
Yeah, I saw that.
Just threw in some Blender kit trees and tried to improve the sand and scattered a bit more salt. The materials are. But I noticed that you are taking off a real microscope, electron microscope reference of actual salt, correct? And you recreated it using geometry nodes to scatter cubes over another cube with a particular weight, and then you put it into your image here.
Yes.
So, you want feedback, right? Are you ready for it? So
No.
I'm going to open up the microphone. What do you guys think?
I'm gonna close.
What's your first impression of this piece from Monday?
Okay, should I go with the stick or the carrot?
Start with the carrot.
Okay. It's actually really good. Like, I love the Fresnel effect from the Fresnel effect on the right side of the cube.
Hmm?
So it has this rim edge of the light, and it actually plays like pleasing to the eye.
Yep.
Like, you have the focus on the main object, and you have other stuff scattered around it, but it doesn't bother the viewer. Other than that, like, the only annoying thing I would say is the noise picture, like the bump. I find it a little bit too much. Like, added just a little bit less of the scale, like scale it a little bit less, so it has, how to say this, like, some surfaces should be smoother, some surfaces have bumps, so you can make the scale like 0.5 or 0.6 on the noise picture. That would give it more random. That, yeah, saying that. But other than that, you did a good job.
All right. That's actually really good feedback. But yeah, you're right. The noise is a little bit too uniform.
Yeah.
We look back, but I mean, I remember you had 45 minutes to do this.
Yeah.
So it's impressive that you got the concept out so quickly.
Just bragging about it, like 30 minutes.
Also, my PC totally did die.
Yeah, it's true. My other concern is basically contrast as well. Like, if you look at the references that I had here in model, my references.
There shouldn't be depth of field, but fuck.
Yeah,
physics,
because
I
it's
guess.
an electron microscope. But yeah, that was an artistic choice. But if you take a look at the contrast between here we have white And in the backgrounds we have grays, and then only in the darkest of the shadows we have blacks. Right? There's a lot of contrast, as you can see. But if you take a look at your image, you're missing out the contrast. Your whitest white is only a medium gray.
Yeah.
So you need to bump your whites up so that it's on the Luma spectrogram. Your highest point actually hits the top, and you're good.
Okay.
All right, very nice. So, thanks, Slink. You're the man of the hour. So today,
Not anymore.
not anymore. Yes, we reviewed your shaders. Thanks for sharing your toon stuff. It's super handy. Very nice. I like the technique. Your salt art is pretty cool. So now we're going to start working on the actual modular asset design. So there are a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. So are you guys ready? This is kind of like going to be like a lesson I'm going to do in the next 15-20 minutes, or maybe half an hour, because there's a lot to go over. So are you guys ready? Go?
Yes.
All right, okay. So I'm using, this is my animatic, which is kind of like a mood board set up to the sound file that I set up here in Blender. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a scene, which is the external scene 1, shot 3. It's a long shot, and it's going through the streets. It's kind of like a drone. The drone is flying through the streets, just sinking into the city. So this is an establishing shot. If we just watch it through, take a look. If you guys are on Twitch, you'll be able to hear the music, hopefully. So let's just press play. Very minimal music. There, it's a short shot. Shot is about, let's take a look at the time, about 3 seconds, 3 seconds and a half. Very short. So it's like probably just one drone slowly dropping down into a street. I got this mood board to get a general idea. So first things first, you always have to look at references, just to get a general idea of what you want to make. So I'm going to break it down. So we're working a breakdown from an animatic. So do you guys know what a breakdown is? A breakdown document? Or is it something a little bit more abstract? What do you guys think?
I don't know.
Okay, so basically, when you start making a production, a breakdown is what a director would have in his management profile, I guess you could say, to kind of like organize and work what you need to do within the project. For example, here I have a progress overview of the project, and in the progress overview we have my delivery date. This isn't updated. I have my days, my ending. I have an idea of my productivity pulse and things like that. This is a minor detail, but from there I have a worksheet. In the worksheet I have my scenes, and each scene is going to have a shot. So this is scene 1, shot number 3, plane number 3, and then I have like a thing called, in Spanish it's called a desgloss, where I can say, does this contain a character? Yes, 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 yes. No, no, no. Where is it? This is in the city center or the city street, but this might be close to the center, and it is a city street. And I can kind of define what a list of all the characters, a list of all the sets, a list of all the props, and define what are my assets. So in my worksheet or desgloss, I can say, okay, I want to work the city street. So I need to start making some block models, and I have like a status or something like this. This could be anything, but basically it's this. You have a list of all the things you need. All the environments, which are the sets, all of the characters, which are your the people that you're going to animate, all the elements of the story, things that you will rig, and all of the props. What are the actors going to use to show the story? For example, are they in a spaceship? Are they going to use a car? Are they going to hold a gun? Are they reading a book? Those are the props. So I make a big list of everything that I need. This list isn't complete, but I have an idea of what I need. So that's the first thing that we need to do when it comes to modular assets, is you need to understand what do you need. And then from there, we can start working on the actual concept, right? So conceptualizing. So conceptualizing is a process of using a mood board, which is gathering references. Once you have your references clear, you can go make a mind map, which is what I call a study, basically, where you take note of consistencies. Then you can do a process called thumbnails, which is kind of like you kind of do a rough painting or a rough block out of what you would need. And then from there, we focus on actual block out. A process which I call like a basic modeling. Right, so this is the process of conceptualizing, and once I have the block out clear, I can move on to the next phase, which is actually detail modeling. But this comes later. Today we're not going to take a look at the detail modeling, we're just going to get to the process of block out. So first things first, we need our references. So you guys remember from last week at the end of the Q&A with the story, I had the short film project, which is a sci-fi based on a city with a DJ, and it's in the future more or less, but it's a very grungy future. So it's run by mafia, it's run, pollution has kind of like become relatively evident that it has lowered life quality. The richer have become richer, obviously, there's a lot more tech, a lot more...
This sounds way too real.
Yeah, it's a cyberpunk, yeah. It's a cyberpunk type of concept of sci-fi. But it's also not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of, it's a lot more like Blade Runner, I guess you could say. A cyberpunk based on film noir. So there's no good, there's no bad, it's very grey. And that's what we're looking at. So let's take a look at
A
our
little bit
reference.
dystopian.
Say that again?
A little bit of a dystopian cyberpunk.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I wouldn't call today dystopia, but something like that. So let's take a look at the client brief. Where's the client brief? So here's the client brief. Let's take a look at the pictures that he sent me. These are the 3 pictures that are important. And let's load that up into PureF. So these are the 2 original art pieces that I have. So let's take a quick look. And this is what we see. We've got tall buildings, we've got lots of neon lights, pink and purple, we've got cables, we've got ground floor. It's a very Tokyo-esque type of city, which is obviously the origins of a lot of cyberpunk cities based from anime and their dystopian type of concept. And we have a lot of signs, we've got some holographic signs as well, we've got water on the ground, so it's very rainy, lots of reflections that I need to think about. We have lots of scaffolding, other concepts. So okay, so that's what we have. Here's a side view. We've got brick, we've got steel, concrete, newspaper, posters everywhere on top of the signs. We've got conventional stores around strip clubs and other club type paraphernalia. This is more like a street from up north, like Boston, Chicago, Toronto, but more around there, Chinatown or something like that. So it looks like there's a lot of globalization happening here, and it's also raining again. So this is a lot more kind of like a neon version of film noir. So we're going to try and make this as a modular asset. We're going to try break this down into pieces so that we can save time recreating this entire street. So to do that, we need to break it up into pieces. So let's go into my other references just to see what kind of art styles that we want. Basically, that means to open up this file here. So let's take a look. So I'll load up my mind map. I've already began my mood boards. Now let's do a list of items that we need to create. So I've got my disk class over here, my list of items here. ready to make the things that I need. So I've kind of made some lists already. So let's take a closer look. Let me compile the shaders because I'm going to use the grease pencil and directly start modeling here to kind of create the library that I need. I'm in my city references. Sorry, it's going to take a while to compile. 1 second, there we go. Go full screen it. Let's take a closer look at the industrial area, the junkyard. Here is the streets. So I have divided my references even more to kind of show that I am lock the rotation of. So I have some more references that I downloaded from other artists I like. I'm not going to use a single one of these images, but I will draw inspiration from. So there's a common consistency that we see, a pattern. So if I bring out a new grease pencil, pull that up, find it. We go to main view, so I can see the grease pencil. View. Here it is. So I have a style guide right here, and I've started taking note of the things that I need. I need a strong silhouette with a pyramid, type forms of shapes. We have signs with mixed shapes of circles, rectangles, and squares. Very simple design. We have lots of light on the ground layer, so there's more light on the ground than the higher layer. We have a geometric circles, rectangles. We have signs that are absolutely massive. So this image speaks a lot to me because it's very close to the painterly style that I have. I take another look here and I notice that, for example, with this image here, I have a lot of zigzagging supports and strands of holding up pieces of the buildings with cloth hanging around. I thought that was a very similar artist as well. He did other pieces which had broken pieces of, like, where you have an apparatus that has a hook or a cable that's attached to a pole. It's holding up another machine that's got these curves. These curves kind of has a very Art Deco vibe to it, where it's a curved line and then a corner. So these curved lines and then corners, curved line and then another corner. These loops and rounds and hooks and strusses are what is a really interesting concept that I like. I also noticed that he often uses like platforms that are held up by two supports. So they look super flimsy with little hooks of pipes, and also piles of rubble on the ground like trash. Very spiky and zigzaggy, but also on the side of the building we have this tall tower of buildings built upon buildings, which is very typical of something like a falabella. So this is the first process that you need to do. You need to start getting a mood board and get your references right. Once you have good references, you're like machine learning. You gotta feed your brain. Once you feed your brain with the good ideas, then you start focusing on your mind map, which is the study, taking note of the consistencies. So I've already started this, which means ultimately I need to create piles of supports, zigzag cross-hatching, lots of pipes and lots of lines with curves and then corners, curve and then corner, curve and then corner. Need a hierarchy of height, which is the first ground level, mid-level, high level, and then decorations on the roof. I need my pieces to be very hooked and looped around at zigzaggy structures that feel flimsy. And I need to focus on a lot of signs, because in the original art, as you can see here, here, the original art, we have signs everywhere. So that's what we're going to work on. We're going to make this a very trippy design. So we have 1, 2, and 3, and then we have the hierarchy. So that means I've divided my modular concept into 3 things. I have shops, I have buildings, and I have supports and pathways. So you always think of this. You think of your design, your mind map, you got to think of what is large, what is medium, and what is small. Okay? What are the details? Right? What is the texture? And what is the general shape of everything? Right, so basically I've made kind of like a note of that I need big buildings that are built kind of like pyramids and stacks, crooked kind of like overbearing building structures. If we go back to the references to prove this, let's go back to my references over here of the street. My high influence images are always stacked. I have everything on top of everything. Everything built on top of everything. Everything's kind of like there's a house inside the middle of these oil rigs. There's old buildings stacked on top of other buildings. There are bridges over the head. You know, you can't see the sky. Have bridges of houses on top of houses, built on top of houses, top of other houses. You have a concept of it's always bigger up higher than it is below. There's more space on the ground, and also there's a concept of you know, the typical Batman from film noir inspired on the big cities like New York. But I also really like the concept of classical Spanish architecture or European colonial architecture that had a concept of building on top of buildings on top of buildings on the mountains, which is very typical back in the day because it was built on the ruins of the previous village that came before you. So nothing's ever finished. So this kind of South American architecture that I really like, very close to home, very close to where I live. And so it's interesting. So to some degree, I have a column of images that I don't like. In this case, for example, I see these stacks, and these stacks are very uniform. I look at very brutalist architecture and the patterns that look like a greeble. Greebles I don't like. This concept of boxy stacking, which is very typical of Asia, for example, I don't like in sci-fi too much, and I do not want to replicate this. So these are the things that I don't want as a reference. So it's good to have good references and bad references. You have good references of things you want and things you do not want. I don't want a procedural look or vibe where things look like something else. So this column of spaceship looks like this column over here, that looks like this column. It looks like the same kit bash on the whole thing. So I need a bit more character. So these are my medium, this is like my medium influence of references where I can say, okay, so here are some, I guess some exceptions to the rule where I can mix and match some of the concepts as an idea or as a culture, where I can have some different types of architecture in the world, which is very typical of where I live. So for example, if I take a look at downtown center of the most influences, the cities are also very mixed and matched. That's what we need to work on. So now we have an idea of something that is supports and pathways, shops, buildings. So let's make a quick pack to test. So first things first, we go back to our list. What is medium, what is large, what is small? We have a list, good. We have a study of our references from the mood board. And now we need to start making some thumbnails to understand how we're going to do it. And then we can start working on the block out. So, is it clear so far? Or is it a little bit, do you have a question about this process before I start actually doing
Clear
some?
enough.
Clear enough? All right. So what I'm going to do then is go back to my days class and I'm going to update it with my notes I took quickly. So I have machine notes, pile of supports, poles, decks, banisters and steps. You've got medium-sized buildings with floor levels of doors, windows and roofs, and the big building shapes. I guess we can start by creating our collections. So if I go here, I'm going to start planning my collections as pieces and divide them into those three groups. So we have decorations, street decorations, then we have the buildings, and then we have the shops. Then from there we start working on the next step, which is basically the subgroups of things. In the street decorations we had, go back, we've got, if you take a closer look, machine nodes. Then we have that one, got a pile, support, piles. Okay, then we have also building supports, because everything's held up by makeshift pieces. We have supports here, and then we have poles, and then we have decks, and we have, after that we've got a broken banisters. Banisters are important. Some banisters. Then we have some steps. Okay, cool. We got 1, 2, 3, we got 7 pieces. After that, we've got a concept of using buildings. So we have, I'm just going to divide them into 3. So we have big building silhouette or chunk. Then we have the small building, and we just have a medium building. These are just chunks, right? So a way a chunk works is you can divide things into pieces. Same concept. For example, if I have this cube over here, and I pretend this is going to be my building chunk, and I decide to like start doing some pieces, grabbing some faces and extruding them out. Right. So I make a shape that's kind of like this. Then, since all the pieces, if I follow my rules, as everything's heavier on the top than the bottom, I start whipping this out a bit. That, and then probably make it a bit bigger. That, and then from down below I have like an overhang. I start also extruding this out, and I start planning this silhouette. So if I go into my sculpting mode, okay, so this is my one of my first buildings. If I take a look at this, just the mesh, go into the silhouette mode, I start taking a look at the shape of the silhouette of that actual mesh, so that I have a general idea of how I want to make the building. Start shaping things to work in the silhouette, so that my designs have a clear communication or language of how I want things to be in the world. So this is where I start to begin, but then I need to think about, okay, so how can I make this modular? So in this case, you start thinking, okay, this is split up into 3 pieces. We have the roof, we have the middle part, and we have the ground level. So the roof, the middle part, and the ground level. So in the ground level, we can say, okay, let's chop it up into pieces. You could say, okay, I only want the roof part is going to be just these spaces here, and I'm going to split that up into a piece. So this is a roof part. This is a chunk. This is what I would call a chunk. So we have the full model silhouette of my building that I want to create, and then I start splitting up into pieces. So now I'm going to take these faces here, and I'm going to call this the middle level of the building, or level 2, which is the medium detail. Just kind of like copy that out, which is going to include the roof around it. Just a rough idea. I mean, there's no one way to skin a cat. So now this is my middle part, separate that, and then I have my ground level here. So now that I have 3 pieces, these are what I call chunks. So once I have a chunk, then I split the chunk up into pieces. So when I have a piece in mind, if I go over here and I have my roof, a piece could be, for example, taking the corner of the roof up here, which is like the edge of the roof, which would be split up into 3 pieces, I suppose. So I'm going to use the wireframe modifier as just a general idea, not relatively quick so you guys can see it. And I'm going to use this as like a kind of an outline of how I'm going to divide the roof up into pieces. So I have an edge. So this is a chunk that I'm going to use as an edge. And then I'm going to use another chunk, which is going to be a corner over here, or another edge. So these are two edges. Cool, great. So that means I can start to like repeat patterns. But now at this edge here, I could say in the middle of the roof, I'm going to have a flat chunk of roof over here. So this could be a chunk over here, which I can duplicate and move it around, and duplicate again. Now I understand that I'm kind of like repeating pieces of the work as like Lego pieces. I just need to copy the Lego pieces to move it around so that I can start creating the shape that I want to create. So once I have my Lego pieces sorted, I can say, okay, well, I need another Lego piece. This Lego piece is going to be the corner. But I need to first localize the data. Go back to my main view. So many images, sorry. It's better to do it when you don't have the mood board loaded up. But now I have the image and I need to localize the data, the object data, and then I can edit this as a new piece. That's my corner. So you start planning out your pieces, and I've created 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of my chunk, and then I'm going to have a side chunk, and then a bottom chunk, and then a decorative chunk, or pieces, so that I can create a roof chunk. With this roof chunk, I could create it and ultimately use like a randomizer or something to kind of randomize the pieces a little bit and replace them based on their measurements, so that I can create a new type of roof and a similar concept depending on the variety that I have. You guys want to see some physical examples of how this works with environments before we finish?
I would love to.
Right, cool. So let me just show you work that I've been doing this week to give you some contextual ideas. So let me just make sure this is loading up correctly. I'll do it with 2 projects. So the first project is a game asset pack. Basically, let's take a look first at my reference. So here we have references of the buildings, which I'm going to load up here. Inside a puref file. Where is it? Ref. Where's it up here? Okay, just load it up here. So for example, is it? Oh, mood board. Mood board number 1. Loading up. Close this. Gonna take a while because there's a lot of images. Alright, so here's my mood board. So basically I have the references from the client she wanted, and then I kind of get some more references from the context, and I started, I had some artists work on the actual pieces of the world that I needed, all the types. We did an analysis of what are the pieces, what is the style, what is the decorations, what is the large detail, what is the medium detail, what is the small detail. And we got a general idea of the shape and the language of the whole world. And then we took concepts of different ideas or pieces, and we started to split that up into chunks. Here we have them here as a list of things. After we did that, we started doing some modeling. So if we take a look, the progress, we started creating the pieces, started doing tests. So let me just load up everything here, because here's the process is very clear. Boom. Okay. So basically what we did was we started to block out the pieces. So we take, now that we have a list of what we need, based from the study, we started to create rough models or block out. This is what we call the block out process. So we understand what is small, large, and medium, and started creating ideas of thumbnails, which is like the concept art. This is optional, depending on what you need to do. This is kind of like part of the mind map. And then you start doing the block out, which is kind of like basic models, measurements, tests, right? You start creating tests. This is also organization of the files, you know, your collections, the naming of the collections, the naming of the objects that you need, and how you to save your objects and things like that. Then after that, you start like doing rough detail. So if we go back to the images here, we have like a bridge, 2 types of bridges, and we have like a road pathway, and we have a couple of other, like another bridge over here. And from there we started, here's a fence, for example. Then after that, we started getting the measurements. Here are the measurements with the pieces, and we started making the next level of detail to work on the pieces. So if we take a look at, for example, this house here that I created, you take the pieces with their measurements and you start breaking it up into chunks. And each chunk, I guess you could say, is kind of like this house here. As you can see, there's a green box that's in the roof. We have a green box which is part of the floor. We have a green box which is part of the wall. These are all chunks of the entire model. Because we have the chunks nice and clear and defined, we can start working on the details of the actual modular asset. So now that we have a chunk created, we have all the little pieces, which is like what I use to create the big chunk. So this is, we have a chunk, and then we divide the chunk into pieces. And these pieces are what I use to build the rest of the entire world, which is this. The trim sheet, for example, is a piece. This plank of wood is another piece with its UVs. The ropes are pieces that I use. The stick over here is another piece. The stone texture and system is another piece. And using these pieces, I can start to create anything that I need, including this wall, which is made out of 3 chunks, and start creating the chunks for the big house. If I have a really big chunk and I need to like bake the materials of this one particular chunk, then I chop it up into 4 pieces, left, right, front and back. So from there, I can start creating an actual library of elements that I can use in a modular way. So for example, let's go see if I can find an image about that. Here we go. So here's like a couple of images where I have like the staircase, a platform, the part of the roof, and all of this is created as part of the actual process. If we take a look back at the progress that I made on that project, I'm still working on it, it's not finished, but I have more pieces, more stuff, more things to show project. Load them up. But as you can see, I'm starting to create more and more chunks. And with each chunk made out of all the little pieces, I can start creating actual buildings. So let's take a closer look. Here I have one type of platform with another type of platform made from different pieces. And then using the different chunks, I can create an actual building of some kind. So here I have a completely new building made from roof pieces that I've set out with the sizes and everything so that they all snap to a certain like 0.5 meters. I'm using half a meter as my snapping. So everything snaps to 0.5 meters to kind of work together to kind of create different variations of the building. I kind of place the columns and pieces. I can create second floors, third floors. I can use different types of platforms or different types of floors or things like that to kind of like move and build around and create different pieces. So for example, let's take a look at the roof. A roof chunk that I created. Okay. Load that up. So as you can see, here I have divided the roof into each of these roofs are made from 4 chunks. The front chunk, left and right chunk, the corner chunk, Yeah, and that's it. Those 4 pieces. The left and right, which is kind of like a flat piece here, side here. The corner piece, which is the same measurements of 4 meters by 4 meters. And then we have this wide roof chunk, which is like, is now, the roofs are 4 meters wide, but 8 meters long. Here's another clear example. So that means I can say I have 4 pieces that can create any type of roof. And you plan it out. You break up your pieces into something that you can work with in the future by swapping and changing and moving the pieces, and then you can work on the actual design of how you work it. So here's like a work in progress. As you can see, here's one piece right here. This is a chunk. So you start dividing your big model into chunks, and you divide the chunks into pieces so that you have the big, small, medium, and you work them together. So that's what I need to do. So that's from there we start working on the block out. And so if I'm here in the scene, I've started planning out the pieces and the measurements. I've decided not to use a square snapping system, but more of an organic snapping system, since my buildings are going to be maybe out of stylistic choice, a lot more stylized, but I still need to work it. So let's take a look at the next project. With these 2 here. And the next project is like this. I created this cliff over here with chunks, and I made the chunks out of 7 pieces. So from there you can work the 7 pieces and you're good to go. So for example, I created a big cliff with the style that I needed, and I split it up into pieces so that I can work them together. In this case, this is free forming, which means I don't need to snap them. So hopefully that gives you a general idea of how to make like something a bit more modular, because at the end of the day, if you make something modular, it becomes much easier to create and much larger structures very quickly. So let's take a look here. We'll call it a day. So for example, with those 7 chunks, I create a wall of cliff, and then from these wall of cliffs, I create 3 big, or from those 7 pieces, sorry, I create 3 chunks. These 3 chunks can create a wall of cliff that can be kilometers long. Absolutely massive, and very quickly. 1, 2, 3 more objects that I've put together. So there we go. That's modularity to some degree. And hopefully you found that interesting. I noticed that I talked quite a long time, so saw some of you guys drop off, but I hope it was good.
That was
Say that again.
I said that was amazing, like at least for me. I've solved so many issues that I'm having right now with a scene, so thank you very much.
Thank you for hanging out to the end, and I'm glad you find it useful.
Yeah, your streams are always useful. Like I don't want to sound like, kissing your ass or anything, but I usually have your streams on the background while I'm working, other than music. Like when I'm having a problem, I usually have most of your streams in the background. So
That's
yeah,
nice.
you're always useful, man. Like I love these streams.
Oh, cool.
Well,
The nerding
that's
new supplier.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Dries, for the presentation. I'm working on an add-on for modular assets, and I picked up quite some ideas. Thanks.
Yeah, because I noticed you made a modulator add-on, right?
Yeah, I'm working on it, but I'm struggling with modular assets. So I took a course somewhere, and now I see your live stream. So that will all help.
Yeah. There's one thing I do like about your add-on is the way that it snaps the assets into a system. I think that's very cool.
Yeah.
Though I do recommend, if you do want some ideas, I recommend you take a look at think it's called Fabricator by Unreal Engine. Or Prefabricator by Unreal Engine. I think this is one of the most amazing modular asset systems that I know of.
Oh.
Mainly because it randomizes the way that you run your assets. So for example, it's like you're using instances and you can just quickly swap them out and move them all individually, and like you can reflect it to everything else, and you can randomize your assets based on a position of a particular instance, for example. So it's really good because I like that concept. And as you can see, he's using chunks as well. He has like a whole building chunk or half a building chunk or an actual piece of the floor chunk. And he was working with that same concept where you have a piece made of pieces made of pieces. And with that, you can randomize those pieces in a very nice way. So I highly recommend you take a look at that add-on if you want some ideas.
Yeah, I'll take a look. Yeah.
The best one I
Great.
know of. If I had that in Blender, man, nothing would.
Okay, so let me get something. So this add-on, you have to create all the modular assets and then load them inside of it, and then it's all randomized.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're using, for example, geometry nodes, you could have a system which randomizes collection indexes for you, and then you use like null locations to drive where these instances are, and maybe like instance to lines and things like that.
Yes, like
You
will
could
generate like
do this.
chunks. Yes.
Yeah, you could
You
do
will
this with
just
geometry
generate
nodes.
some squares. You model like some squares, a window, a door, and something, and then with geonodes you like randomize all of it. Also maybe with shader you also randomize color, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a small question. I hope I'm not like taking lots of your time,
Right?
because okay, so if I understand correctly, I don't know if you used Curtis's like a modular generator, like the space station generator or the weapon generator.
I've used some of
Anyway,
them, but I haven't used it in production.
okay, so as if he uses a system where he basically have like an empty as like the origin of the objects, and then makes it that all the origin snaps together. So
Curtis generators in Biogen, by the way.
yeah,
Oh, it's called Baijin?
yeah, he added in like in Biogen 7 or 8, I can't remember.
Yeah, Biogen, I actually hear in 7, but in 8 it got easier to use.
Yeah.
Store and then on is Gumroad.
So
Biogen free.
yeah, it's basically like geometry node, but old edition.
Not old. Not
Yeah,
old.
yeah,
But
like
stupid.
old school edition. But it's really
Yeah,
useful.
sometimes.
Anyways, so if you have the time, like next time, not today, can you explain a little bit about modularity and like how it works for that?
Sorry, you cut out there for a moment.
Sorry. Like if in like next time or another time, can you like during the stream show how you do like modules or like building stuff like that for production purposes? Because all the tutorials I find are more for like renders, so you make a modular asset just for some renders and then export it. it it's kind of like trash. So, and I'm trying to find a new system to follow for production purposes. So I don't know if it's possible.
Sure, yeah, I need to like work on this project a lot more. Current project that I just showed you of the rocks has been taking up most of my time. This week, for example. But once I finish that project, I'll be able to focus on this project a lot more. I have one other client, and then I focus on this project full time till early next year. once I'm working this full time, that means every week there's going to be a lot more updates and a lot more showcases of the project. So I'm currently in the process of design, concepting. So if I go back here, I'm in the process of creating thumbnails.
Okay.
So as soon as I plan to create just one mind map of one particular thing to test out the painterly with a modular scenery set and maybe one character to test animation. In that case, I guess once I have more work done next week, then I can show you an actual like work in progress of what the process is. So it's like, for example, everything you see here in next week, I guess this is a preview to next week. Everything you see in this mind map will eventually be made public in this Q&A. Like this street here, I'll make it into a modular system. I'll show you how it works. I also have to teach myself some geometry nodes to see if I can use it for scattering or generating buildings in that kind of like the prefabricator type of way, you know. Create an index that changes everything. We'll see how it works.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to it.
Well, if you want, Race, I can show you like the generation of Bigen.
As geometry nodes now, right?
Not now, but Kurt is definitely working on a geometry nodes version of Bigen.
He said that he will add it in version 9, like he had like
Yes.
the latest video.
To take a look at that as well. Also have to take a look at Newsuplay's modulator as well. I can afford it.
Yeah, if you can link it in the Q&A chat.
Dig it up.
But download Bigen. The Bigen is definitely a good thing. It also like generative modeling. So yeah, it's actually cool.
The chat now. Alright guys, well, stream has been a long one. I need to have some lunch and get back to work.
Okay, thanks.
Cool, and thanks for the patience at the beginning as well with the bad microphone. Right, hopefully not too much was missed. So I'll talk to you guys same time next week. Same place, same time next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
And my
Bye.